Hi and welcome to the Back to School Summit with Apps Events, and it's supported by Acer for Education. This session is going to talk about all the practical and productive ways that you can use Chromebooks in the classroom on a one-to-one basis. We're having a look at how we can get interactive with slide decks, and we're going to have a look at, if you're a primary school, this is one for you, how we can use different tools to welcome your class and get to know your class a little bit better. So this is working with three of our best trainers. I'm going to put them on to introduce themselves to you, and then we're going to go ahead with the session. So I'm going to introduce Beth Evans.
Hi there, Zaytoon.
And Fran.
Hi.
And then we've got Katie.
Hi, everyone.
So you'll be joined by each one of these trainers for their 30-minute session throughout the hour and a half that we have together. Please put your comments in, add any questions that you might have. I'll put them up for them to answer. But let's get started. So first up, we have just 1 minute. Let me just have a look. Okay, so first up we have Fran, who's going to work her way through and talk about how to use Chromebooks in the classroom. Okay, so over to you, Fran.
Thank you. As Zaytoon said, hi, I'm Fran. I'm a maths teacher and digital lead in a large secondary school, and we're also a Google reference school. I joined the school 5 academic years ago, and they were already one-to-one with Chromebooks. So I'm here today just to talk a little bit about how I use them in the classroom. It's by no means an exhaustive list, and I'm sure if you've got any extra tips, you can pop them in the comments so then we can all continue learning, which is obviously why we're all here. I started off my teaching career like 17 years ago as a PE teacher, worked up to head of PE. So I'm coming very much at this from like a hands-on practical sort of background, and then bringing in the digital stuff through the Google Trainer work that I've been doing over the last 6 months. So hopefully we'll have some good ideas. My main areas that I'm going to cover today are listed just up on the screen just now, and really focusing on how to use them effectively in the classroom, but I will just be throwing in there a few tips for a teacher organisation as well, just in case that would be something that you are interested in. So first thing I wanted to focus on with being effective in the classroom is actually the Chromebook itself. At our school, from a safety point of view, we actually have some additional software that allows us to look at all the students' screens. So obviously we can be walking around the classroom, making sure that we're looking, making sure that the students are on task, making sure they're not on anything that they shouldn't be, because with the best will in the world and all the blockers that we have, occasionally there are workarounds that the students find just before we do. Another tip that obviously works well within any situation, not just one-to-one Chromebook use, is also your movement around the room. So quite a few of the classrooms that I teach in, the desks are in rows, so it's nice and easy. I can stand at the back, I can be on my Chromebook, I can see every student's screen. If they're more grouped, you might need to just do a little bit more movement around the room, but definitely circulating does work to help keep students on task. A lot of the shortcuts that are really handy to use within using Chromebooks in lessons are on the little image that's up on the screen. Now, I just literally, this is the one that I've been using that I think Zaytoon shared something similar with us last year or the year before. And there are so many of those online, and you can make your own. So obviously if you've got one that a few shortcuts that you mainly use, you can use those. And I tend to save those in within a topic within Google Classroom, which I will come on to on the next slide. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail so that students, especially year 7s when they're first starting out, actually have something to refer back to without having to keep asking and then interrupting the flow of their lesson. One tip as well for classroom use is the brightness button, which are the 2 buttons that are sort of above the keys 7 and 9 on my Chromebook anyway. It'll probably depend on the size of your Chromebook. They just look like two little cogs. One's a bit smaller, one's a bit bigger. And students tend to, in some of my lessons, put the brightness right down if they're off task, just to sort of try and hide it. So that's another top tip for them, making sure that they're being used to the best of their ability. Volume, I tend to have a rule that unless we're on a task that involves them needing to listen to something, in which case we might use headphones, well, they will use headphones, then the Chromebooks are on mute, because it can be quite distracting if one of our, because I'm a maths teacher, one of our packages, it pings when they get an answer right, which obviously can be quite distracting for the other students in the room. So yeah, volume is something that you might want to have a look at. And then the other thing, which I suppose is linked to shortcuts, is the use of the touchpad. Because if they're not used to Chromebooks when they first start using, that can take a little bit to get used to. The best thing, the 3 top tips for me on that are the 2-finger tap is a right click. So they're looking everywhere for the 2 little clicky buttons, but on some Chromebooks they're not there. 2-finger tap gives you the right click to give you extra options on most things. Using 2 fingers to scroll, because they want to go to the right hand side to drag the little bar up and down, and obviously it's much faster if they just use those 2 fingers to scroll. And something that I only actually discovered within like very recently myself, embarrassingly so, but never mind, is if they're using 3 fingers to slide across the keypad, the touchpad, sorry, it does actually switch tabs, which is obviously really, really good if you've got lots of tabs open, like I always seem to do. So then they can quickly come back to different tasks. As Zaytoon said earlier, if you do have any questions, just pop them into the chat, and I will try and keep an eye on those and maybe come back to them at the end. So I'm going to flick onto my Google Classroom in a second to show you how some of these things work. And just to let you know that the students that are in that classroom are actually members of staff. So there's no student names being revealed on there. So Google Classroom / calendar, I named it, because within this effective use of these Chromebooks when they're one-to-one, Classroom and calendar work so well together, like seamlessly. And it's especially effective if students' timetables are also used within Google Calendar. So the first thing I would like to look at would be Google Classroom headers. So this is actually a staff classroom that I created in May this year. For staff by staff is just the name for the training that we do at our school. So it's training that's run for the staff by the staff. That's what that little acronym is, just in case it's a bit confusing. And I led a session on Google Workspace. So all the resources that I provided was in here. And I created this little header, the class header, within Canva. I do find Canva quite good for designing things like this, but obviously you could just do it yourself in whatever software you normally use. But I just find I tend to do a different one for each class that I have with the students. It gives them a little bit of ownership. And I know a lot of times when they log into Google Classroom, so if I just go into my classes overview now, they will just see lots of these that are the same. And our Google admins set, for example, each year 9 class will be blue and each year 8 class will be purple. So obviously, if you've got one that's got maybe your Bitmoji on it, or just something to make it stand out a little bit and make it a little bit different, that tends to engage them, let's say, and it'll be very quick to hopefully find your classroom to get started. The next tip I definitely always use, because it leads on to tip 3, which is reminders in calendar, is the way that I would schedule the work. So for example, you would click into your classroom and then go to classwork. I then click create. And instead of just posting something that I wanted the students to do within the stream, I would post it within classwork and as an assignment. I can then select, excuse me, I can then select a due date. Okay, so I'm going to go with the due date being tomorrow. It automatically picks tomorrow, and then you can just set a time. Once I've done this, and then I'll post the assignment, or I might want to schedule the assignment, I can then, it then pops up as a reminder for them in their calendar. So when they check the calendar, or if they have the alert set up, it comes up as a little alert at the top of the screen, and then they will obviously get sent a little reminder that they've not completed that work, or they've not submitted that work. So I'll just create a little dummy one now, just so we can do the scheduling. What I've found as well is each time, I'll just use this one, which I'm going to add later. Each time I do this, I have quite a few classes where they're at the same academic year, and they're also of the same ability level in the maths lessons that we're doing. So what I can do then is I can actually schedule it for all of those classes. So I've got 4 classes in total. And then if I click on the little drop down arrow on the right hand side, so instead of assigning it straight away, I can click on schedule. And then I can separately schedule assignments to all of these classes. So what I mean by separately is I can actually create a different due time for this class, because I know that actually there's an inset day the first day back, so they're not going to get that work until the day after, so they need to have an extra day to complete it, an extra 2 days to complete it. These guys are on a geography field trip, so I'm going to give them till the middle of the following week to complete that. I can also select different topics as well within each one, if it relates to something different for each class, or if I've called it something different for each class, which I do find obviously is a very efficient use of my time, as well as making me more effective and using my time better elsewhere, which is nice. So we have scheduling work, and then that will pop up as a reminder in the calendar. When I was looking at the topics that I used, I mainly focused on one of my classes from last year, and you can see that on the right hand side of the screen here. Down at the bottom, this is the biggest tip or the biggest plus point I found for all of my Google Classrooms. So we start, we have an inset day on Thursday this week at my school, and then on Friday the students are in. So before any students arrive, within each classroom I'll set up a topic called information and passwords, and in there I will put all of the passwords that they need for all of my lessons. So we have at least 2 maths specific programs that they need to log into, and a maths specific game site that I need them to log into. And that just means that it's going to be very efficient. First week back, yes, because obviously then hopefully they'll remember to click save when they enter the passwords, but also later on in the term, new students arrive, I can just quickly add in their password information. So because of that, I tend to use Google Sheets to store the passwords, so that then it can just be updated continuously. And then we have some different topics in maths. So for example, Money Monday, assessments, and do nows, which are the tasks that students do right at the start of every lesson. And then everything else is labelled by the half term. So if they're going back to revise, they can clearly see where they need to go, what they need to do, and how they can just revise more effectively, hopefully, efficiently. And in the bottom section here, I was just looking at when I added the Jamboard in earlier, I was allowing just students to view that file. There is also an option to edit the file, and there's also an option to make a copy for each student. So when you make each student a copy, obviously they've all got their own individual copies then of that. That makes it really, really good for us then as members of staff, because we can see what every student is doing on those Jamboards or on the doc. You can tab between them, so you can look at where each individual is up to. If you notice that they're not writing anything, you can say, oh, if anyone needs any help on this, you could give a general announcement, or you could offer specific targeted help, obviously, as you're working your way around the room. Another good use of Google Classroom is actually if you're creating some work and you just want to assign it to one specific student. So when we're talking about being effective, if I assign some work to Kelly, that might not be appropriate for the work that I might assign to Anna. So without Anna realizing, oh, I'm not allowed to do that task because that's going to be too difficult for me, or that's not where my target area is for this particular assignment or topic. They won't know, they'll just be given individual pieces of work. So I can choose that I'm going to set this just for Kelly and then assign that into Classroom. And then I would go back in with the second option and assign that one just for Anna. So there's no confusion over which task am I doing. It's just been allocated straight into Classroom, and that's the only thing that they can see. Obviously, you'll have like 20 to 30 students there to pick from. But once you obviously know your students, once we've got a couple of weeks into term, and it does become quite easy. I also find it an easy way to set targeted work and intervention work. So I'll come on later to look at assessments. And once our students have been assessed in the maths lessons, they will then pick up on some key areas, key topics that they need to look at again, and then they can actually, I can actually target what extension work they might do or what work they might do to fill in those gaps. The other thing that is up on the screen here is the marking rubric. Because of the nature of our maths assessments, which I will come on to in a second. I don't actually use this, but I know some colleagues that do. And it is a very quick and easy way. Once you've assigned a task in Classroom, it's just then tick boxes that can allow you to keep a track of their assessment and their progress through the assignments that you set them within Classroom. So although I don't use that myself currently, I know that that's something that might be worth, people might want to look into. I'm just going to briefly look at Jamboard because I know we're going to be definitely touching on that a little bit later on. Just on a couple of things that I use it for in my lessons that really, really work and help to keep students on track. The progress tracker that I've got on as a separate Jamboard is super useful. This one I would give the rights for students to edit, because then that way that they can move themselves along the progress bar. So you could make the little initial tabs smaller. You could get them to type their own names in, however you want to do it. So I might start myself off as here. So we're doing highest common factor, lowest common multiple. And then by the end of the lesson, I'm going to move myself up. I'm feeling a bit more confident now, and that's where I'm finishing off. So you've just got a little bit of feedback from the students. I'll share a copy of this presentation, and I do have that as a template for you if you wanted to use it as well. I also use Jamboard in our maths lessons for teacher notes. So this little screen grab here is an example of the notes that I've used with Year 9s looking at angles. Once I'd put this on, I'd done it on the board on a Jamboard just because I was finding it easier for myself to write up on the board. And a lot of the students were asking, could they have a copy of it? So yeah, not a problem at all. And then from that, so starting last academic year, all of my notes for all of the classes have been on a Jamboard. So obviously this is the 4th slide of the Jamboard. And it did progress from very, very simple, very basic notes, which were annotated. Moving on to then just with angles. Now we're moving on to bearings. Now we're moving on to there's no drawing given. It's just you have to draw it yourself. And then we're moving on to more like test or exam style questions. Okay. They are view only. So none of the students can actually change anything that I've written. So there's no risk there. And the feedback from students is that they really enjoy it. There are other ways that you can do notes. within lessons, but Jamboard for me, for maths, does work really well. I can do it on my school Chromebook is touchscreen, so I can do it onto my Chromebook when I'm walking around the room and it's up on the teacher board at the front. Or I can do it onto the board at the front as well. And it's very useful for students if they're absent. Another couple of quick ones, collaborative learning. So working together to do some research, adding that to the Jamboard because of the nature of Jamboard as well, with adding images and drawing and freehand writing, very useful, and group work so that all of the students can contribute. And within that as well, you can set the tasks on a different slide of the Jamboard. So then students, you can sort of monitor where they're up to. You could add it in within Google Classroom, so it makes a copy each, or you could assign it, as I showed earlier, just ticking the correct students. So you make it so that they can edit it and all of those students can edit it. And then you can go into each group's Jamboard and see if anyone needs any help, or obviously then mark it at the end. Within Docs and being effective in the classroom, the last apps events live that I did, we did accessibility, and I was looking at speech to text, which is a great function within Google Docs, which once you've enabled it, students can speak, and then obviously that gets typed in. You can also include punctuation as well in there, which is really, really useful. Obviously, like with all the Google apps, we can be collaborative. We can work on things at the same time. I know a lot of our English teachers use this as well for their assessment. So they'll have all the assessment things linked within a Google Doc that the students can look into. I also find Google Docs really useful for scaffolding. And again, you can assign different amounts of help to different students or different groups of students within this. But in terms of giving them some structure to their answers, so especially if you're using written answers that might include a little bit more. So I know some of our lessons have 6 or 8 mark questions, but you could provide some structure there for the students if you wanted to, and then take it out for others. But it looks as if on Google Classroom, they're just logged in and they're all getting the same document. But obviously you will have provided support for certain learners if necessary. The template that you can see on the screen is my teacher planner. I've found this really useful the last 2 to 3 academic years now, especially since the use of the smart chips, because this is my template now for the next academic year. So I can add in my smart chip for my year 9 lessons. So from my planner, not only can I see what lessons have I got today, what rooms are they in, I can also see, just click straight onto the slide deck, and then straight away I'm up and running within my lesson, which is especially useful if you, like we do, move classrooms in between classes. So that just makes me more effective, as in I'm getting in there, I'm logged, I'm already ready. I've got my Chromebook, I can just plug it in and then I'm good to go, which obviously makes for more effective teaching. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for Google Docs. In all of the Google apps, you can quickly access Google Keep, which is super useful. I use it a lot, and I'm also trying to get my students to use it as well. So when you open an app, you should see on the right-hand side, the little yellow light bulb, or the right-hand side, a little orange light bulb. And when you open Keep, it opens it as a panel at the side of your screen. You can then open it in full screen, which helps, which is how you then make the edits that we're going to look at just now. I mainly use it from Gmail, and I find it really good with Gmail. If you're in an email that maybe a few students have responded to something that you've said and you're in communication with them, if you then open Keep and press New Note, it asks you if you want to add those people into that note, and you can share it within within those students. So say, for example, they are doing some group work, you need them to work on something together. You can then start that keep note, and then that will share it with them as well. And then they can add to the list of things to do. And then obviously they can tick them off as they go along, which is really useful. I tend to use it for CPD notes because in the past I've had notebooks that haven't kept them, I haven't used them. Whereas now I'm keeping those notes, obviously hopefully making me a better teacher. And any meetings that I go to, and I'm a massive fan of a to-do list. And obviously the functions within Keep of being able to tick things off is obviously very satisfying. And within the full expansion of Keep, you can also add these tabs, so the labels they're called, and then you can keep everything nice and organized. So if you just have a quick look at sheets, because I'm just conscious of time now. I do mainly use sheets for my teacher admin, just because the simple formula that's used there, it's super easy to work out. Like with it being maths, let's work out the class's average score, because students want to know, especially after we've done averages, where am I in the class? So it's never something that I would announce to students, like where they are in the class or anything, but some of them are interested. So obviously they know their individual scores, and I can tell them the class mean average, and then they can sort of have an idea of whereabouts they are. The example at the bottom is one of the feedback sheets that we have for our Year 7 classes. And what we have here is a sheet that's assigned within Google Classroom. It makes a copy for each student. So if students get added to the class later in the academic year, it generates them another one as well. So late arrivals to school, doesn't matter, they will have one of these feedback sheets. We colour code how well they do on the assessments. When this is conditional formatting, so I just need to type in a number 4 if they've done exceptional, and it will make it blue. They don't see any of the numbers. That's just our conditional formatting in the background. And then once they've received that feedback, their job then is to do any follow-up tasks that we have. And then there's a bit of there's a comments box here. So then there's a bit of accountability for the students. So not only are they going to be effective during the lessons, but actually any assessments that we do, the feedback that they get, we're encouraging them to act on it, make comments, and actually follow up, so that when they get reassessed, maybe at the end of the year or at the end of the following term, they can see themselves, oh, actually, I've closed that gap now. I now can work with negative numbers when I'm doing the 4 operations, for example. So I have found that to be quite a useful tool. And then lastly, some of the bits that didn't quite fit into any other section. I do use Google Meet if my teacher screen fails in the classroom, so then the students can still see my slides at the rate at which I want to see them. Because obviously you could just share them with them straight away, but then they might not necessarily fit to the pattern and the speed of the lesson that you want it to work to. The camera within the Chromebook can be effective if you wanted them to take on board some example work maybe, but they're concerned that they might not remember that. They could take a photo of it. If you're doing writing on the board that's not within your Jamboard, or an example question comes up that they like the look of, that they want to use, then I'll encourage them to take a picture of the board or the screen or whatever, or the piece of paper, whatever it is, with the camera, and then save it into their maths folder on the Google Drive. Screen breaks, I don't mean it's broken. What I mean by that is making sure I have at least one task every lesson where they're not on the screens, because we are a one-to-one Chromebook school, and they could go through the whole day where they're on the Chromebook all day, which obviously isn't great for their eyes particularly. But also just to give the brain a bit of a break, just taking something in differently and using pen or pencil maybe, just making sure they have a little bit of a break from that. And power source. Chromebooks should last 8 hours, which obviously should cover them for the full school day. But I do know that especially as they get a little bit older, sometimes they do not last for the full 8 hours. We have, within our school policy, it's called a standards card, and having your Chromebook charged is on there. However, we're also in an area of deprivation, and with obviously fuel poverty, that will definitely be a massive issue this coming winter. Just having a power source readily available where you're like, actually, that's where you can reach the plug, making sure that they do that without any fuss as well. So I always say to my students, don't ask me, just you fix it yourself. So you ask to either swap desks or can you pass that plug along and can you please plug it into the wall? And I think, hopefully, unless we've got any questions, that might be me done.
That's fantastic. Thank you there, Fran. Really, really good tips there. I really like the idea of using Google Meet if your your whiteboard stops working. I've never thought of that. That's a really, really good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your input here. It's been really useful. Obviously, everything's been recorded. You can go, watch back at any time on demand. That's absolutely fine. That was Francesca Burry. She's a in-service teacher at the moment, giving you actual tips in the classroom as it's happening. Thank you, Fran.
Thank you.
Okay, so just before we move on to our next guest, I just want to add in a couple of little things that I want you to be aware of. So firstly, if you are at a point where you are wanting to look into Google Workspace for Education Plus, there we have got a 60-day trial. If you are interested, then head over to appsevents.com/workspace and let us know. And we're happy to set up a 60-day trial of Google Workspace Education Plus. Now, there's many things in there that will help in the classroom as well. Just like Francesca was just saying there, using Google Meet inside the classroom. One of the features within the Education Plus is having breakout rooms and polls within there, and using that in a classroom on a day-to-day basis, and not waiting for a remote session to happen in order for you to use it. That's a fantastic idea there. Also, obviously we're being sponsored by Acer for Education, so thank you, Acer, for sponsoring Apps Events and these summits that we're able to put on for you. If you want to win a free seat for any of the future Apps Events bootcamps or summit, go over to the link here. I'll pop it over into the chat in a minute, and fill in the forms that are there, and hopefully you'll be able to win a free seat to any future bootcamps or summit. Saying that, in the UK, we have got a summit coming up in the northwest of England, boot camp on the 21st of August. If you are available, if you're looking to do your level 1 or your level 2 exams anytime soon, then please head over to Apps Events and get yourself registered in for the level 1, level 2 boot camp happening in the northwest. That's in Manchester on the 21st of October. Okay, next we have some new courses. Now, these are super exciting. There's so many people who are currently using these, and the feedback has been amazing. So get yourself onto a free online educator and admin Google course. Okay, learn.appsevent.com. There's courses on there that will help you right the way through the use of the basic tools within the fundamentals of Google Workspace. I'm also prepping you for level 1 and also prepping you for level 2. The content being created is being created by experts who have been using the tools for many years, trainers who are really good in what they are doing. So please head over to Apps Events, learning.appsevents.com, and see what Google courses are readily available for you for free. Okay. Couple of other things in here now. Data literacy for school and harnessing the power of Data Studio. Now, I have personally done this course, and it has been an eye-opener of how much we can actually take away from the day-to-day data that's coming in through Google Classroom, through Sheets, or anything that we're using, and how we can put it all into Data Studio to create an interactive dashboard for us, so we can instantly see the progression of our students. So if you are looking for something that is to do with data, then get your hands onto this course. It's a 3-week duration course. Contact James at appsevent.com for further information. Now we are really excited to bring on board Katie, who has joined us. So Katie is going to be looking at how we can use Google Slides and what we can do with Google Slides. Now, I love Google Slides, so I'm looking forward to seeing what Katie has in store for us. So I'm going to head over and hand it over to Katie.
All right. Thanks very much, Steen. Yep, so today we're going to be talking about Google Slides and looking at maybe some basic skills that you're familiar with, but how to use those in a way that's more interactive with our students. So instead of just presenting to students, which is a great way to use Google Slides. It's an awesome presentation tool. But instead, we're going to have our students create presentations with us and get more engaged and involved using Google Slides in a collaborative way. So my name, thank you, Zaytun, is Katie Steen, and I'm a Google certified trainer and a Google certified coach. I started my journey in education as a secondary English and literature teacher in the US, and then eventually moved abroad to take on technology coordinator roles in international schools. So the last 8 years, I've been focused on using technology in the classroom, working with teachers in their classrooms to use technology in the best way that they can. And now I focus primarily on Google training and Google coaching, helping teachers all over the world to use Google Workspace to its full advantage in their classroom. And of course, you can connect with me on Twitter at my blog. I'd love to connect with you and hear what you are doing in the classroom. So today, what we're going to look at is a collaborative slide deck with your students. And because we are in our back to school session and everyone is starting the year, we are going to create an all about us class collaborative presentation. So we're going to use that as our way to learn some different skills and look at how to create a collaborative slide deck with your students. And then we'll talk about some different ideas that you can use these skills in other ways with lots of different activities throughout the year. So the main skills that we're going to focus on is creating and sharing slide decks. So different ways that you would share them based on the activity that you're doing. Creating and layering objects. So taking more advantage of objects on the screen and how we can do that. And then creating templates using images and changing backgrounds in Google Slides. And if we have some time at the end, we will look at a couple other tips and tricks for using more interactive features of Google Slides presentation tools. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is this all about us slide deck. Okay. And we are going to make it all about us. This is an activity that you probably already do with your students, either in a paper version or other ways. I know we're going to hear another session coming up about other ways to get information from your students and get to know them as back to school. But it's a pretty typical activity that we all do at the beginning of school, and we're going to use this in a digital way today. So you can see the easiest way to begin with a back to school presentation for your students is just to create a slide and to let them run with it. So this is a sample of a presentation that I did with my class a couple of years ago, and I began with a sample slide about myself as a model for them. So always good to model your expectations for your students so they can see what to expect. Okay, so you can see the variety of information that I have, different pictures, texts, boxes. And you can see some samples from my students. This was a 6th grade English class, I believe. So English as a foreign language for students. So we were practicing language as well as our Google Slides. So you can see the variety of ways that my students put these slides together with their first time using Google Slides with me in class. Okay, so the simplest way, as we can see, is just to give your students free rein. So you can create a blank slide, which I'm going to do up here by clicking the plus button to create a new blank slide. Okay. And letting my students kind of go for it to explore the different tools to put whatever it is that they want to share with me on their slide. So I have a couple of text boxes, as we always do, usually with a new slide. So I'm going to get rid of those to create a blank canvas. And I can do that 2 really easy ways. I can click on an empty space, drag and select both boxes. And I can just go ahead and delete them that way. Or I can use a keyboard shortcut and use Control or Command A, depending on your device. Select all the objects on my slide and go ahead and delete it that way. Okay. So when creating a blank slide for students, they're probably going to want to do a couple of things. They might want some color. I don't know about you, but my students generally don't like white blank backgrounds. They want to add all the fun visual images that they can. So we're going to start by changing the background color of our slide to make it a little prettier and more interesting for our students. So on this blank slide, I'm going to go up to background. And I can change the color. So here I can choose whatever color I want. I can do a gradient. So I could do something like this, depending on what students want. I can create a custom color. Your students will get creative with getting all the different colors that they like, I am sure. I'm going to go with this light sage green for the purposes of this slide. We have a couple other things that we'll do with backgrounds later on. So we'll go ahead and touch on images a little bit later. So hold that thought. Okay, so I'm done. Now I have a nice green background, a little more interesting than the white. I want to add in some pictures and text about myself, probably. So I'm going to go up to Insert, and I'm going to choose an image. Now, what I love about using images in Google Slides is that they've made it really, really easy to do this with your students. And it also makes it safe. So we have a couple things that I want to do. If you see in our menu, we can choose to upload a picture that we already have on our computer. We can get them from Drive, Photos, a URL of an image online. Or if you're using a Chromebook or any other computer with a built-in camera, you can use this camera function. So I love the built-in camera function because this is an About Me slide, so you probably want a picture of yourself. So I can use my camera and I can take a picture of me right here in the tool and insert it right into my presentation. Okay, so I have my picture. I'm going to go ahead and insert it. And now I have this image right here that I can go ahead and crop. I can edit that and include it. Okay. But I might also want to add some pictures like me and my students did of things that we like, different images to make kind of a collage about ourselves. And so the other way that you can insert images in slides is by searching the web. So Slides has a built-in image search function that's simple and safe because these images are filtered and they have the right copyrights. So it only includes images that students can use. And so you aren't breaking any digital citizenship or copyright rules right off the bat. So we can make sure that these are safe, and it can also be a conversation with your students. So I'm going to go up to Insert an Image, and I'm going to choose Search the Web. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. One more time. And so I already have beach built in because I like the beach. But up here in search for images, we can just do a normal search the way you would. So I would like a beach picture. So I'll hit enter and see what comes up. So I'm actually based in Barcelona. So these are some nice pictures of the Barcelona beach. So I will include this one. I also like more tropical beaches that are not in the Mediterranean. So maybe I'll choose this one as well. So I can choose these two photos. I can see I have two selected. If I don't want those, I can hit the X. Okay, and start from scratch. And when I'm ready, we can insert the images. And now I have them here. Okay, so I could downsize them both at once because they're both selected, or I can click off and I can do things individually and I can size these down. Okay, maybe I want to get a little fancier and I want to layer my images. So I want to do some different layering activities. So depending on how you add your pictures to a slide, you can see one is on top of the other. And this is something that you can easily change. You can layer different images behind one another. And the easiest way to do that is to right click on an image and go to the order. And you can send your images back, bring them forward, and you can layer your images this way. So a couple different tools that we have. When we bring in our images, we have a lot of different formatting techniques that we can use. So when I click on an image and it is selected, we can go up to the bar and we can crop images, we can replace them, we can reset them if we've done some different editing. Button. Okay, so you have some different options. You can specifically put in heights, you can flip them, rotate them, all kinds of different things. But you also have a couple different recoloring images. So these are not quite as fancy as all the filters that you can use in other apps, but for your students, maybe they want to recolor and add a few different options. They can go black and white or bring in some different colors. So a lot of different options that you have. You can add in a drop shadow to make it look a little more professional. You can add in a reflection to bring in some dimensions. So I'm sure your students will have a lot of fun learning about different Google Slide skills, some basic little photo editing techniques, as well as making a pretty slideshow. Okay, so these are some of the basics ways that they can bring in some different photos. Of course, we can add in text boxes. So if we click on our text box, we can add in the text that we want. So all about me, name, whatever information your students want to write. Hey, so super, super simple way to get started is simply to create a presentation, share it with your students. Each student gets their own slide and they have full control to create an About Me slide for themselves. And so they can create things like my students did that are completely their choice. And especially at the beginning of the year, not only is this a great way to get to know your students, but it's also a really great way to introduce Google Slides and start teaching some of those basic skills to your students about how to interact with slides. Hey, but you may be thinking, I want something a little different than this. I don't want my students to just put whatever they want. Or they need a little more guidance. And just a blank slide is too much for my students right at the beginning of the year. It's too intimidating. So if that is the case for you, and that's what you're thinking, we're going to look at another way to create a back to school activity, and that is to create a template in Google Slides that your students can fill in instead. Okay, so instead of giving them a blank slide, what I'm going to do here is in Google Slides itself, I'm going to design and recreate kind of a graphic organizer or one of those back to school printouts that you might have done in the past. Okay, so I'm going to do this right in Slides and I'm going to create this for them so that they can just fill in the information instead of bringing everything in from scratch. Okay, so what I did was I used a combination of text boxes and objects. Okay. So I like objects in Google Slides. There are a ton of kind of design elements that you can do with this that they have a lot of flexibility and you can create quite a bit with it actually in Slides. There's a lot more design power in Slides than people often think of. Okay? And so I like to use objects, which is going to be up here in your shapes. So we're going to use the shapes tool to create some different shapes that we can use. So what I've done here is created some different boxes for students to fill in. So my favorite foods, this year I want to learn, my favorite subject, 3 words that describe me, and my name is. And I'm going to add one more. I want to know what my students want to be when they grow up right now. So I'm going to add one more box for us here. So I'm going to take this shape and I can look at all kinds of different shapes that I might want to include. Okay, and in this first shapes button, I'm going to use this cloud. So I'm going to fill in this middle gap with a cloud. So I've chosen my shape. I'm going to click and drag my shape in the middle. Okay, so now I have a nice little cloud. I have a colored background here, which is fine. Your students can type over a color if they want, but I'm going to prefer to create a transparent background so that we can just see the white background here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and fill in the color up here on my menu bar, and I'm going to choose transparent. Okay, so I'm going to take away that color. I also have a lot of different options to make this more visually interesting by changing the border. Okay, so next to my fill tool, I have my border color, so I could change the color if I wanted. Next to that, I have border weight. So I could change the border weight, make it a little thicker. I might change this to black, might change this to 4 pixels. And so I can have kind of a thicker border. I could also, as you see, use some of the different dot and dash options with my border. So if I click there, I could turn this into dashes. I could turn this into dash dots. So we have a lot of different options that we can do to create some interesting border options. Okay, so now I've got my shape. I have changed my colors a little bit, and I want to add in the text of what I want them to put in that box. Now, when you work with shapes on Google Slides, it comes with a text box built in. Okay, so you do have this text box here. Okay. But for this template, I don't really like the placement. It kind of puts it right in the middle. You have a few formatting options in terms of where it goes in the box, but I really want it to be on the side so that my students know that they're going to put their answers in the blank space. So I'll go ahead and select this text. I'm not going to use the box that comes with the shape, and instead I'm going to create my own text box. So I'll go ahead and put that in the box, in the shape here. I'm going to paste my text. I'm going to size it down a little, change it to a font I like better. Okay. And now I'm going to position it. So I can position this wherever I want in the text, in the shape. So I can have it exactly where I want and customize it specifically to my needs. Okay. The next tip that I'm going to share with you is when you do that, now if I want to move things around, that gets a little frustrating. And so I'm going to group these objects together so that they become one object, and then I can move them around and can put them wherever I want or resize them together. So to do that, just like we did with deleting the boxes on the slide, I'm going to go to a blank spot on the slide, select both boxes. I'm going to right click, and this group option has appeared. There's also some keyboard shortcuts for that. So I'm going to group it, and now I have an object that I can move around with my text box as I see fit. Okay, so now you have a nice template. So instead of a blank slide where your students create something like this, you now have a nice template that you can share with your students, and they can add in text boxes and fill in this template instead. But when we share something like this, we do have all these boxes that can be moved. And if we add our own text box, okay, if students click, it could be a little frustrating for them to manage which objects should be moved and which shouldn't be. So instead of sending it directly like this, we are going to take this to the next step, and we will create a locked down background so that students get just the template, and then they can add in their own objects and text boxes to customize it without worrying about changing the template or accidentally deleting a box that you have. So it should eliminate some of the troubleshooting that you have to do with students. And how we're going to do that is with this background tool. So when we looked at this before, we looked at changing the color, but we can also insert an image and create an image as our background. This is something that one of my students did. You can see here as his background. He found a nice image of water and used that as his background, but we're going to do something different. So what I want to do is take the template that I created in Slides and create an image from it. I can do this in a couple of ways. Depending on your computer, you could take a screenshot of this image and use that as your photo. But Slides has another built-in, really easy way to create an image from this slide. Okay, so I'm currently on the slide that I want. I'm going to go up to File, and I'm going to download this current slide as an image. Okay, so you can do this. There are a lot of options that you can export and download your slides as for lots of other reasons. But you also have this really great option to create a scalable vector graphic, PNG images, or JPEGs. And I'm going to create a PNG image from the current slide. Okay, so when I have done that, it's going to download the slide as an image. And now I can use that as my background. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank slide. I'm going to delete my text boxes. And I'm going to go up to the background tool so we can change this background. Okay? And instead of color, I'm going to choose an image. Because I have this right here, I'm just going to go ahead and drag it in. Okay. And now I have the template that we created right in slides. I now have this as a background. Okay. So I have this as a background that students can then add their own text to without worrying about deleting or changing anything on the slide. So I can create this. They now have free reign within the template that I've created, and they can go ahead and fill this in for me. You can duplicate this. If you want everyone on the same slide, you could create just a duplicate of this slide, one for each of your students, and you could share that with them. Or you could give students their own copy where they could fill this in. So hopefully, if this is the first time you're hearing about something like this, using templates as a background, your mind might be moving to all the different ways that you can do it. So this is one small example of a back to school activity, but the skills that you're using here, you could use for any kind of activity all throughout the year, both collaborative presentations that students create together and using these backgrounds as a template. So thinking about some different ideas, this is a really easy way to create drag and drop activities. When you create a background in Google Slides like we just did, you could create any kind of background. So you could create a graphic organizer like a T-chart or a Venn diagram or a KWL chart and give those for students to fill in, creating kind of an interactive notebook with your Google Slides. You could create a drag and drop activity by creating a background. For example, if you wanted students to label the parts of a plant, you could create the plant as a background and then add vocabulary words as text boxes that they can manipulate. So you can use a background for things that you want to be static and bring in other elements that students can manipulate and drag and drop. As far as a collaborative activity with your students, instead of an all about me presentation, maybe you take a story that you're reading and put different sentences from the story on each slide and have students illustrate different parts of the story, either with a group or partner or on their own. And by the end, you've created an ebook using Google Slides. That's very simple, something that you could then download as a PDF and create a nice, simple ebook that can be shared and imported to your library and all kinds of things. So Google Slides really has a lot of power and a lot more design applications than sometimes we think of it. Okay. The last thing that I'm going to share with you is just thinking about the different ways that you want to share your presentations. Hey, so if you're sharing with students at a collaborative activity, so you want all students to be able to create a slide, you want them to be able to edit your presentation, you of course can go up to the share button and you can do a couple different things. If you have all of your students' email addresses, you can do that. If you have a Google group already set up or a listserv with your students, you can email that directly to them. You can also make sure you have general access. You can have someone, anyone with the link, or limit it to your domain, and you can post the link on your class website or whatever virtual learning system you are using. But if you are using Google Classroom, which if you are using Google Workspace and you are not using Google Classroom, I highly recommend it if you can, depending on what other systems your school is using, just because it really makes things very smooth and makes it very easy to do some different things. So I know Fran talked a bit about Google Classroom earlier, so also highly recommended. So I'm just going to show you what we might do. So in Google Classroom, I have here to share this with my students easily, I might create an assignment in classwork. Okay. And this might be my all about me presentation. I'm going to go to my drive and create and share the slideshow that I've already created. Perhaps if I've already created my sample template or my instructions, I'm going to go ahead and choose that. So this is my back to school activity. And I'm going to choose to add that. And down here in our sharing settings, we have a few different options. So we can have our students view the file. Of course, it's just a resource. I can have my students edit the file. So if I want all my students to collaborate on the same presentation, I'm going to give them editing rights. But if I've created something more like a graphic organizer or an interactive notebook, I'm going to make a copy for each of my students, and each of my students have their own slideshow templates that I've created that they can fill in. So instead of it being a collaborative activity, maybe it's an individual activity that students are interacting with on that slideshow. So I can make a copy for each of my students. I can assign it to my classes. They each get their own copy, and I can easily see and interact with each student's different different presentation or whatever it might be. Okay, so hopefully those are a couple of ideas that you can use to go back to school with your students. Thinking about, instead of just using presentation tools as a one-way flow of information to your students, how can you have them using slides, interacting, collaborating with each other, and creating with you?
Absolutely fantastic there. Thank you, Katie, for those great tips, all to do with Google Slides. Really, really like the idea of an ebook. You know, how many times have we just got students to create a presentation and then just taking that one step further with an ebook? Wow, amazing.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We are going to move on, and we have got one more presenter for you today. So moving on, we're going to have a couple of little announcements for you, and then we're going to go in, and Beth is going to share with you some information about the younger students, the primary school students, and what we can do there. So firstly, again, thank you to Acer for Education. And again, if you are wanting to win that free seat for any future apps, events, boot camps or summits, please do go to Google to the gsummit.link/Acer. Also, Acer Chromebooks. I have always used an Acer Chromebook. I find them the best, one of the best tools to go to. The sizes range from 11 inches right the way to 15. You got the traditional Chromebook, and then you've got the 360 degrees turn Chromebook, which is really good in a classroom, to be honest. It turns into a tablet and a Chromebook, which again, with those younger students, it's what you need when you want to take those quick little pictures of their work, instead of having a extra camera setting. So you got the rear and world facing cameras, you got stylus. All of our teachers in my schools that I've taught in all use a stylus. Why? Because it's a quick and easy way for them to create that whiteboard kind of effect, you know, using a tool that's in their hand. So yeah, it's rugged in order for it to deal with the children who are using these Chromebooks, right? They put them into their bag, and they will fling their bag across the football field, not even thinking they've got a Chromebook in it, but it's durable. Okay. Finally, we're going to have a look at getting ISTE certified. Now, I personally have done every qualification there is in within Google. So I'm a Google certified trainer, coach, innovator, and ISTE is definitely the next thing on my list as well. There are 3 cohorts coming up: September the 8th, October the 10th, and November the 8th. It's really good to put in the back of everything we're doing with EdTech, some actual context as to why we're doing and the benefits to it. And ISTE is one of those knowledgeable places to go and standards to look at. If you have liked what we have put on together today for you, please subscribe, watch, and like and share our videos. It's videos.appsevents.com. We're on YouTube. Also, we have the International Schools podcast with Dan Taylor and John. Again, really, really good way of listening to the stuff that's happening every day. Now, getting on to our final trainer for today. We have got Beth. Beth Evans. Hello. Beth, your mic is on mute.
I mean, we wouldn't be in a post-pandemic world if I wasn't on mute.
No,
So.
of course not. Okay, so Beth is going to have a look at, again, amazing Jamboard and forms, but really, really drill into what we can do with those younger ones. Over to you, Beth.
Thanks, Atun. So I'm Beth. I'm a digital consultant and sketchnoter from Cardiff, Wales. I was a primary teacher for 8 years, and I led ICT and digital skills. In Wales, it's called the Digital Competence Framework. And I also led the transformation of my school from server to Google Cloud, which is probably where my Google obsession began, when I realized how it had the power to transform both my teaching and the teaching of my colleagues, also how we work together as a staff, and then the learning experiences that we can provide for our students. And for the last 4 years, I've been working in EdTech, coaching educators to develop their digital skills and growing confidence to improve their workflows, their efficiency, and create more engaging and memorable experiences for their students. So one of my favorite days in the school year was always meeting my new class. And we used to have a transition morning or afternoon or lesson. And funnily enough, there are some great Google tools that you can use in these sessions. And I'm going to be showing you a couple of them today. Now, when you think of Google tools and tools that you can use to get to know your class, you are actually spoilt for choice. So the first few that come to mind for me: Jamboard, Forms, Slides, Docs, Sheets. We've been very lucky this morning. We've had a look at some of the other tools available, and I'm going to be showing you two of my favorites, which are Jamboard and Forms. And Google Jamboard is what we're going to start with. Now, when the students came into my class, first of all, they were quite timid, quite shy. And I was in a school where we used to actually mix the children every single year. So those friendship bonds had to be developed again, which could be obviously quite stressful for some of the kids. So when they came into the classroom, the first thing I would get them to do is some informal fun activities. So it's a good way to just break that kind of ice, as it were, icebreakers, get your students talking, not only to you as the teacher, but to each other as well, and to start developing those bonds. And I'm going to jump in a moment and show you what's available. Now, I know that as a teacher, time is of the essence. You don't have much of it. So the first thing I would do is actually search for existing Jamboards. Now, I'll click onto here and it should take me through to my page here. Now, this is a Jamboard that I actually found online. So all I've done is I've gone to Google, I've typed in getting to know you Jamboard. And you'll see you'll get loads of ideas. Okay, I've just clicked the top one here and I've clicked into it. And you can read an article. Now, the community of educators, I think, is wonderful on the internet, because so many teachers put their resources for free, which I just think is fantastic. So you can scroll down here. There's lots of different things. And all I've done is click on one of the links and created a copy for myself. Now, if you're familiar with Jamboard, you will know this interface. And what this person has done is, if I click on to the slides at the top, expand frame bar, they've just put memes or images as the background of each jam. And the idea being that your new students can then work through each of the frames and they can tell you all about themselves. And it's just really informal. So at this point, we're just breaking the ice. We're getting to know our class. We don't want to get too deep just yet because we haven't got that relationship with them. So let me just show you a couple of the tools. So if I said, for example, this one here, and I've popped that there, post your answer, I would assume in my school that my students would know what these tools were. But if you're not sure about Jamboard, you've got a very simple set of tools on the left-hand side here. You've got the pen tool. So if you have got devices with styluses, like Zaytoon was referencing, you could get them to practice their writing and their letter formation. You can then erase answers as well. You can select items. Now, I've set this as a background, so they shouldn't be able to move anything, which is good. And sticky notes. This is the one that I would probably direct them to straight away. You can add images, which I'll get to in a second, shapes and text boxes. And then for the teacher, when I'm presenting back, you've also got a really handy laser pointer as well. And let me just show you this one. I can then highlight answers. So I can say, oh, look, this is a really interesting from so-and-so. And it just disappears then as you use it. For the sticky notes, very simple. You just click to add it. You pop your answer in there. So I could say one warning would be, I can be a little messy. And you can change the color if you want to as well and hit save, and it will pop it onto the board. Now, of course, if your students had accounts within your Google domain, then you will be able to tell who's posted what. So you can move that then. You can use the corners to resize. You can also rotate. And then once you get the number of post-its, so you can see here they overlap, you can also click and you can order them. So you can either send them to the back or send them to the front. Now, depending on the devices that you have in your classroom, okay, Jamboard will work on a variety of them, which is good. It'll work if you have a Chrome browser. So that means if you've got a PC or a Mac, you can use it on there. If you've got iPads, you can also download the app. Now, we had 16 iPads in our classes and then 16 Chromebooks as well. So even if you've got mixed devices, these tools work right across the board. If I click into the frames at the top, I might go through this as a teacher and think, well, actually, I don't want one of these slides. It's not quite right for my class. So I'm going to click on to say this one here. You've got the 3 dots in the top right, and you can just click to delete. So you can even make copies of things and then edit them to fit your needs, because as teachers, time is just a resource that you don't have much of. If you did want to create one from scratch, that's absolutely fine. You would go straight into your Google Drive. You can go to just search Jamboard, but I'm a little bit of a control freak, so I like to create everything from my drive. I might then click here, for example, right-click More, and then you've got your Jamboard here. It will take you through to a blank jam. And this is where you've got the options, just like in the screen we've just seen. You can title it first of all. So I can just say Getting to Know You. Okay. And I can set a background if I want to. You've got some standard backgrounds. So really handy, like before when we were talking about maths Jamboard. So you've got some graph paper, maybe some geometric dots as well, or you can insert images as well. Now you've got upload, all the usual options, Google Drive, etc. You can even type Google image search. So I might put rainbow pastel. And I might just select this one here because it's nice and plain for a background, set as frame background, and it will pop that in there for me. Now, I might decide that actually I want to keep mine really simple, and I'm going to use the text box. Click the text box icon on the left. It will give you a cursor. And I'm going to just put, what is your favorite food? And then I'll put here, answer with a photo. And it can also be a really good way to develop a few of those digital skills without them even realizing it. So you can prompt them to answer with a photo, answer with a text box, answer with a sticky note, and so on. You can then move this and position it, and they can then complete it. If they wanted to add more frames, just click to expand the frame bar at the top. And you can either add a new frame here, or you can duplicate. So if you were going to use the same background, save yourself a bit of time, click onto it. I can then click, I can go straight into it, and I can edit it for the next slide. Now remember, as with all things Google Drive, this will auto-save. And once you're ready to share it, then you can hit the share button. At the moment, you'll see when I hover over it, it says private to only me. Now you're going to need to change that. So you can then go into general access, use the drop down menu, and then I could say, for example, anyone with the link, or it would be within my domain. So just make sure you change those settings before you try and share it. So if I head back now into my presentation, oh, 1 second. And oh, there we are. This is what I would do. So I've got them informal. I've got them talking, using their kind of chat with their friends, their new friends. With me, I'm moving around the classroom while they're completing this. But now I want to get a little bit deeper into information that will help me as a teacher. So we've used Jamboard for the informal information, but now we really want to look at some information that can help you and to collect some data that's actually going to help you understand your students a little bit further. So I'm going to click into here and show you an example form, okay? Now, excuse the thumbnail there. I could probably do with editing that one. But I'm going to have a little look here. Now, the first thing I did is I went to a fresh Google search page and I just typed in getting to know new class Google Forms, okay? And you'll see here, I found a link at the top of the page. I clicked it and I scrolled down and you get the option to make a copy for yourself. So again, all of the questions were there for me. I've gone into it, I've clicked to make a copy for myself, and now I've started editing it. And I just want to show you that if you're already using Google Forms, there are different ways to make it accessible and fun for your class. Now, the first thing I would always recommend doing is adding a welcome video for your students. And to do this, I use an extension called Screencastify. It's just up here on my toolbar. If I click it, it will expand. And you get some different options. So you can record your browser tab, which is really useful if you want to show them how to do something, your desktop, or your webcam only. So I've just recorded a quick video using my webcam only. And then you have to upload, well, you don't have to, but it works best if you upload to YouTube. I always put it as an unlisted video, and then it allows you to add a video straight into your form here. So when I go into preview mode to see what it will look like for my students, I can click on this. Hi everybody, I'm Miss Evans and I will be your teacher this year. I can't wait to find out all about you. So if you complete the Google form and let me know all the interesting things about you and your personality so we can get to know each other better. It will allow you to give your students that personal greeting. Not only that, it might also help those students who potentially can't access typed words or have lower literacy skills. So it's just something to consider, but it's a really, really nice one to have up your sleeve. Screencastify, I just use the free version of the extension and it saves it direct to your Google Drive as well. So after that, I've gone through the questions that were on there, and you'll notice that these first three questions look a little bit different. And that's because I've added a moat, because I might have students coming up to me who don't have the literacy skills to access this. And I want to make sure that this form is as accessible as it can be for my students. And what I've done is when I've been building this form, so when I click into the question, I also have an extension at the top called Moat installed. And you'll see that when you install it, you then get a Moat option when you click on each different question within your form. If you hover over it, it will say click to record. And that's exactly what I've done. So what I've done is I've actually used the button up here and I've clicked it, and you'll see here it says record a Moat voice note. So I click to record that and I will say read the question. So what is your first name? It will then generate a link for you, which you then just copy straight into your question. And again, if I head back into the preview version, my students can then click play. What is your first name? And so even if they can't access the question by reading it, they can listen to it and then obviously they can answer as well. So if you have got learners who may have those additional needs, it's a really nice tool to use. So that's Moat and how it integrates nicely with forms. Now, the questions that I liked to ask my class were quite varied because it gave me a better picture of who they were as students and also what their home life was like and how I could best support them. So if I scroll down, I ask questions such as, who can I use this name around? So what name do you want me to call you in class? I had children who had full long names, but actually they wanted to be called a nickname. That's fine, whatever they were more comfortable with. Then also, when is your birthday? This was really useful because, of course, we could celebrate then as a class, and I had a list ready-made for me. No sending around clipboards in my classroom. Do you have access to Wi-Fi or internet at home? Because actually understanding my pupils and their home situation gave me a better way then of supporting them in class, offering them time to complete tasks if they wanted to in their breaks or in assembly time and so on. Do you have a quiet place to work on a school day? Now you'll notice I'm using a variety of the tools within Forms. So I've used the calendar, the date selection, I've used the multiple choice, I've used short answer as well. So Forms is really built for this, okay? I've gone through then and I've actually split my form into sections. Now there's different reasons for this. And you could also split it into different forms. And this is what I used to do with my class, and I'll show you why now. If we go to the preview, I would actually split my getting to know you survey into different sections. So the first one would be, for example, like you. The second form would be your family and so on. And the reason I did this was because up in the Omni box at the top of the screen, there's a little share button. And if you click that, you get the option to create a QR code. Now, with transition lessons, they can be quite sedentary, the kids just sitting there listening you and so on. Now, with the forms already being created, what I used to do was I would then maybe create my form or 3 different forms, 4 different forms to collect this information and create a QR code. These QR codes could then be placed around different points in my classroom so that the children could then move about with their devices, because remember I had iPads, and they could scan them, get chatting to the kids around them, fill in that onto the next section. So we turned it into a little bit of like an information hunt, as it were. So they could then scan the QR codes, and then it was a QR code hunt to find the next bit of information. And let's face it, what kids don't love telling you about themselves? If I scroll down to the bottom here, sorry, go back to my editing window. If I scroll to the bottom here, this information I found really useful, okay? Working out who your students live with. So I've got checkbox lists here. And again, if I scroll down, finding out what mum did or dad or the carer does. Do you have sisters, brothers? What languages do you speak with your family? And this information was then really useful come parents' evening when I could understand more about the parents or carers coming to see me and what we could kind of talk about. Now, I'm going to scroll down. If you are not aware of the joy of forms, you get your 3 tabs across the top here. So once my students would begin to fill them in, I would head to the responses tab. Now, this is a brand new form, so obviously I have 0 responses, but it's a good way to keep track because obviously as my students would answer it, I'd be able to see that going up and up. And if I had 30 in my transition session and I could see that 30 people had responded, then that's how I knew they were getting on well with it. Then if you click this, I used to call it the magic green button, and it says create a spreadsheet. If you click this and then I just click create, it will create a sheet that actually correlates all of the information from your form. So you don't actually have to do anything. As long as you can get the kids to move around the classroom, complete the form, you can actually be interacting with the children and actually getting to know them without being sat behind a computer, which I think is brilliant. And then, of course, you've got all of this data to take away with you and to digest. And then finally, I want to talk to you about the settings. So in settings here, you've got some things that you might want to have a look at. Now, I wouldn't want to make it a quiz. There's no points to be won for this one, but you have got some options here that you might want to consider. You might want to collect email addresses. You might want to allow editing of responses. And you might want to limit to 1 response per user. So make sure that you know these settings are here in the settings tab, and make sure you set them however you want your form to function. Now, in presentation, I like to show a progress bar because I like to know where I am in a quiz or a form. So I always turn this on. For this particular form, I don't want to shuffle the question order because they are in a specific order, but you could if you wanted to. I've also changed the confirmation message. So when they finish the form, they will get a message from me and it says, I'm so grateful to have you in our class this year. I can't wait to get to know you as we learn together. And if you were using, for example, Screencastify, you could even record a little video there, pop the link from either Drive or YouTube into this box, and they could then view that as well. And that's forms in a nutshell. The only other thing that I will show you is how to change what it looks like. Customize theme up here on the top right. If you click that, forms is deliberately simple, and that's kind of why I like it. But you've got some options for your header, your question, and your text. So these are your headers, your questions, and your text. You can change from the defaults if you wanted to. You can also change the header image. This is this image here. So I could get rid of that if I wanted to. I could click choose image, and you've got a huge selection, you'll see here, of images that you could use. I tend to go for the kind of illustrations just because they're usually really nice and colorful. So you'll definitely find something in there that works for you. I'm going to go for this lovely cityscape here, insert, and you'll notice when you put in the header, it automatically changed the color of the rest of your form. So if you're not too fussy, you can create these really, really quickly. You can edit the color if you want. It gives you a few options on the theme there. And once you're done, then you would just share it. And like I said before, you could click send, okay? And you get the option to share the link here. You can always shorten the URL if you needed to. Or my favorite way to do it with my class was to click to share the QR code. But make sure if you're doing this, that you are in preview. So this is what your students will arrive on. So again, click create QR code and then pop that up somewhere in your classroom. So if I just head back over to here, I'm pretty sure that's everything. Yes, Zaytoon, is there anything else you think I should be adding in about forms and Jamboard?
I think you've done a really, really quick, good, to the point kind of thing with forms, and it's a tool that's not used often enough, is it? It's a tool that can capture a lot of information about your students before you even get them into the classroom, even sending it out at the end of the year, ready for the next academic year. Every single class in primary school has that day where they move up to the next year and have that new day with a new teacher. So this might be an activity for then, or it might be the first activity that you do when you are welcoming your class in. And remember, using the QR codes, adding in the introductory videos the way Beth has shown you there. It's all really useful for accessibility as well, but also for those younger learners who can't quite read a question yet. It is really easy way of finding quick information about that student. Thank you so much, Beth. Really good. We're just going to finish off this webinar with a few more aspects that we need to just have a look into. Here we go. So firstly, we are just going to work our way through some more of these different things that are coming up. Now, we have got some amazing summits in the pipeline. We have, if you have got the role of the technician maybe in school, or you know somebody who is new to the role who just needs a little bit of help, GAM tips for Google Classroom is coming up on the 20th of September with two awesome technicians or admin staff within the schools. We've got Charlie Love and we've got Peter Hortner, and they will go through all the top tips that they have in the background to get everything set up. We've also got the European Google for Education Summit coming up, again level 1 and level 2 boot camp. That is being hosted in Amsterdam. So again, if you are, and I'll be honest with you, the very first time I came to an apps events summit, it was in Zurich, and it was amazing, just amazing to see people face to face and how you can interact with those people, and you learn so much, and it's so fast paced, and it's a brilliant opportunity. So there's a European Google for Education Summit coming up in Amsterdam. We've also got our UK based one. This time it's in northwest of the UK in Manchester. You've got some details there. It's at the Hive in Manchester. If you are wanting or thinking of doing a level 1 or level 2 exams, then please pop along there. It's a boot camp. We'll go through all the different aspects of what comes up in the level 1 exam and talk around that. There's obviously a capacity there of 40 for level 1 and 30 for level 2. So get your names in there as quick as you can. And then we've got Future of Education. It's a Korea Google for Education Summit. Again, it's based in November. Level 1 and level 2. So if you are a little bit more international, then there is another one there for you. Just want to thank you, Fran, Katie, and Beth for their amazing tips about going back to school and just having those little tips and tricks just to get started smoothly at the beginning of the year and throughout the year. Thank you to them. Thank you to Acer for supporting Google these webinars and putting on these free webinars for you guys to access. Get social and share what is happening. If you thought this webinar was had quite a few good tips in there, get onto social media, #Google PD and apps events, and let's get sharing.